Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Vishnupad Panamansa Pariprad Charja Ashtotar Shri Srimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Adanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kundagiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol. Thank you, Maharaj, and thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu, for leading us in Kirtan. And welcome to everyone for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayādvaita Swami. It is Wednesday, August 17th, 2022, at least in the Western Hemisphere. And we are reading in the third canto tonight, the 7th chapter, starting with verse number 4. And very eager to hear everyone's questions and comments tonight. And we're so glad you could be with us again, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Akendra Prabhu. And thank you, Mahesh Pandit Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Arakshid Bhagavan Vishvam Guna Mayatmamayaya Kaya Samsthapayat Yetad Bhuya Pratyapitasyati. By his self-sheltered potency of the three modes of material nature, the Lord has caused the creation of this universe. By her, he maintains the creation and conversely dissolves it again and again. Purport: this cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with him by imitation. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Dadhati Shapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jatapadakamaman Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Gaganatan Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lolita Sri Vishakhan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostude Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hori Priye Vansha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Arakshid Bhagavan Vishvam Guna Mayat Padmayaya Taya Sangstapiyat Yetad Bhuya Pratyapitasyati. This first line of the purport is worth review. This cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with Him by imitation. First, there's the understanding that the universe is created by the Lord. That's the first thing. It's not created, self-created. But it's not created by the Lord for His own interest. It's for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with Him by imitation. I remember hearing in the early lectures of 26 Second Avenue, devotees would say that we're in this material world because we wanted to become God, or because we wanted to be God. And I remember thinking, I don't want to be God. I never even believed in God. Why would I want to become God? Something's not right here. But here, Prabhupada really nails it. The illusory thought of becoming one with Him by imitation. Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, and somehow or other, the living entities get it into their heads that we could enjoy also like that. We could have sense gratification. We could be the center of everything. We could imitate by becoming enjoyers instead of servants. Why be servants when we can be enjoyers? So in that way, we want to become one with Krishna by imitation. And of course, it's illusory. What kind of enjoyers do we become? We may get carried away by the illusory thought, but what kind of enjoyment will we get in this miserable material world? So, cosmic universe is created by the Lord for those living entities who are carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with Him by imitation. The three modes of material nature are for the further bewilderment of the conditioned souls. What is that? Purusha prakriti sto hi bhunte prakriti janguna karanam guna sangasya sadasad yoni janushu, the Bhagavatam. The living entities as false Purushas become, try to lord it over the prakriti and enjoy what the three modes of nature produce, prakriti jan gunan. And karanam guna sangyasya. In this way, the living beings become associated with the modes of material nature, that is, entangled with the modes of material nature, and sadasad yoni janushu, have to go on taking birth after birth again and again. The conditioned living entity, bewildered by the illusory energy, considers himself a part of the material creation due to forgetfulness of his spiritual identity. And thus he becomes entangled in material activities, life after life. Generically, we consider ourselves Americans or Indians or members of this family or that family, this group or that group. We consider ourselves part of the material creation. Or it becomes refined and sophisticated under the level of science, under the label of science, and we consider ourselves parts, literally products of material combinations of elements. Bewildered. And thus we become entangled in material activities. Again, whether just ordinary pedestrian activities or advanced scientific achievements, but either way, we go on trying to exploit the resources of material nature. We become more and more entangled, and this continues and drags on life after life. This material world is not for the purpose of the Lord Himself, but is for the conditioned souls who wanted to be controllers due to misuse of their God-gifted minute independence. Thus, the conditioned souls are subjected to repeated birth and death. So Srila Prabhupada, again, situates the responsibility for our conditioned life with us, with we ourselves. We're the ones who want to enjoy falsely the material energy. We're the ones who want to control. Isharo ham bhogi. We want to control, we want to enjoy. We enjoy controlling. And by this misuse of our tiny independence, we become entangled and sadasad yoni subjected to repeated birth and death. Are there any comments here, questions? Saraswati.
Pranam Param Puchya Maharaj. Maharaj, I've faced a very difficult argument and I kind of feel defeated. And the question is in two parts. And please forgive me for asking this, but this is what I was faced with. If Krishna is absolutely perfect in every way, and the jivas are all his parts and parcels and the marginal energy, then the fact that Krishna has eternally conditioned parts, the jivas, that are faulty and malfunctioning is an obvious sign that the supreme whole cannot be perfect, since now he has one of his energies that is flawed. The supreme owner of all the energies, if one of his energies is failing, then that's a direct reflection of his failing too. That's the first part of the question. And the second question is, since eternally conditioned souls exist, living a pointless life in complete illusion in a miserable material world, then Krishna, who knows all past, present, and future of all the jivas, would certainly know which of these conditioned souls will never ever become liberated and will forever remain conditioned. So if Krishna is all merciful, why doesn't he show mercy and extinguish the existence of those flawed, eternally conditioned jivas and end their miserable existence? And when I said to him that as eternal parts and parcels of Krishna, we are eternal, then the argument was, well, now you've pointed out a limitation of Krishna, that he is so powerful, yet he cannot extinguish his part and parcel. So that's a limitation if he cannot do that. Thank you, Maharaj.
Well, starting at the back of your question, well, you have two questions there. Doesn't the imperfection of the living entities reflect an imperfection in Krishna? And why doesn't Krishna essentially perform euthanasia on the living entities who are going to turn away from him? And doesn't it reflect some sort of limitation for Krishna, that he can't extinguish the eternality of the living beings? First of all, let's distinguish between can't and won't. Krishna can do whatever he wants. He can take eternity and stand it on its head, but he doesn't. That's not how he's set things up. That's not Krishna's limitation, that's Krishna's choice. He has things working in a certain way, and it doesn't reflect limitation at all. It reflects how he chooses to do things. And again, why doesn't he extinguish the life of the miserable living beings? This is what they want. This is what they want. So, it's almost like whatever he does, you'll criticize. If he takes away our independence, you'll say he's despotic. If he gives us independence, you'll criticize him for allowing us to be in a fallen state. Whatever he does, everything will be Krishna's fault. So grow up, kid. Take the responsibility for your own fallen state, and don't go on complaining about Krishna. Become Krishna conscious and straighten out and fly right, as they say, and your problem will be over. Krishna provides the miserable existence, yes. He also provides the way to get out of it. Now it's up to you. And don't raise useless objections like he must know, who won't. You become Krishna conscious. Solve your problem and don't complain that he must know and he's a cruel because he doesn't, and this and that. These are all useless objections. As for the point of Krishna's, the existence of the flawed living entities, implying that Krishna's flawed, this comes up actually in the verses that we'll be reading. The Vidura essentially asks the same question. How is it that in the perfect absolute, there can be imperfect living entities? So we'll see how Maitreya Muni answers this question, and we'll see how Srila Prabhupada actually right away as the question is being asked, again, responds to it. But again, this is Krishna's not imperfect, but perfect arrangement, that there are some living entities who want to enjoy, and Krishna gives scope for it. That it's illusory means that it won't work, and it means that there'll be trouble instead. But Krishna gives the space for that. That's part of his perfection, that he gives a chance to the living entities who, it's not despotic. You have to surrender to me. If you want to be independent, be independent. Or rather, if you want to misuse your independence, misuse it. Kendra Prabhu.
Oh, thank you so much, Maharaja. I'm glad you took the time to go over that first sentence of the purport, because as I was reading it, a couple of things occurred to me as well, that it's the nature of the infinitesimal soul to be a follower of the greatest soul. And even in the absence of any kind of Krishna consciousness or God consciousness, I was thinking how Krishna says, Yad Garacharati Shrestas, that it's the nature of the common man to follow some greater person. And the example that came to mind, I guess maybe because I have some musical background, is how thousands of people for decades have been trying to imitate the Beatles because they saw them on TV, and they were carried away by the illusory thought of becoming one with the Beatles by imitation, and it led to those other thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Like this, I had a thought and then it disappeared. But, all right, we'll let it go. And one with him by imitation. Your hand's still up, Kendra, or up again? Okay. Yes. All right. Let us move forward. Deshata kalato yosav vastata svatonyataha avilupta vabodhatma sayujyeta jayakatam. The pure soul is pure consciousness and is never out of consciousness, either due to circumstances, time, situations, dreams, or other causes. How then does he become engaged in nescience? Purport. The consciousness of the living being is always present and never changes under any circumstances, as above mentioned. When a living man moves from one place to another, he is conscious that he has changed his position. He is always present in the past, present, and future, like electricity. One can remember incidents from his past and can conjecture about his future also on the basis of past experience. He never forgets his personal identity, even though he is placed in awkward circumstances. How then can the living entity become forgetful of his real identity as pure spirit soul and identify with matter, unless influenced by something beyond himself? The conclusion is that the living entity is influenced by the avidya potency, as confirmed in both the Vishnu Puran and the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The living entity is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 7.5 as Para Prakriti. And in the Vishnu Purana, he is mentioned as the Para Shakti. He is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord as potency and not as potent. The potent can exhibit many potencies, but the potency cannot equal the potent at any stage. One potency may be overcome by another potency, but to the potent, all potencies are under control. The Jiva potency, or the Kshetragya Shakti of the Lord, has the tendency to be overpowered by the external potency, avidya, karma, sangya. And in this way, he is placed in the awkward circumstances of material existence. The living entity cannot be forgetful of his real identity unless influenced by the avidya potency. Because the living entity is prone to the influence of the avidya potency, he can never equal the supreme potent. The Vishnu Shakti Parapropta Ketragyakya Tatapara Avidya Karma Sangyanya Tritiya Shakti Yishite in the Vishnu Purana. The personality of Godhead has his transcendental internal potency, and the living beings also belong to the internal potency. They're of the superior nature. But avidya, karma, sangyanya, tritiya shakti. But the living entity, being marginal or tiny in size, comes under the influence of the third potency, ignorance, avidya, and becomes entangled in material activities. So how is it that if the living entity is part and parcel of Krishna, he can be bewildered? He's bewildered by another potency of Krishna. He comes under the influence. Why does he come under the influence? Anadir Bahirmukh Bhogavanchakari. He wants to enjoy the material nature, and so he turns away from Krishna. Bahirmukh. He turns away, and as soon as he turns away from Krishna, then he's turning toward Maya. And when he turns toward Maya, he becomes influenced, he becomes overwhelmed. That's his position. The living entity is by nature free from all these things. What is that? Yam Purusha. Asanga Hiyam Purusha. Living entity has no connection with the material nature. But when he turns toward the material nature, he becomes connected. He tries to enjoy, to exploit the material nature. And Prabhupada gave the example of New Vrindavan. I've cited this sometimes. He was performing a fire yajna, and he, at one point, put a stick of wood into the earth beneath the fire, pulled it up and said, "This is very instructive. This is very instructive." What is that? There were some moths, dead moths in the sand. And Prabhupada said, the fire does not jump out at the moth, but the moth, thinking to enjoy the glittering fire, flies into the flames and dies. So the living entity turns away from Krishna, then at once captured by me. This is our position. I was thinking also in regard to Saraswati's question that the sun is fully potent, and the sun also produces sunlight and produces clouds. So the clouds, although there are clouds in the sky, that's not an imperfection of the sun. That's also part of the sun's arrangement. But they're just here in India, it's rainy season. So the clouds are blocking the sun, or apparently blocking the sun. But that's the arrangement of things. The sun is not less potent because it's blocked from our eyes. The clouds that are blocking the sun are also creations of the sun itself. So we may not appreciate it. We're inconvenienced by the rains and what have you. But that's also Krishna, the sun's arrangement, where everything is Krishna's arrangement. The city dwellers may not appreciate the rainy season and all the rain and cars up to their knees in traffic, in water. But the farmers will appreciate the clouds and the rains. So the stane rishikesha tava prakirtya jagat pravishyatyan vajyatecha. The devotees will appreciate everything arranged by Krishna. When the universal form revealed how he was destroying all the soldiers on both sides, Arjuna said, yes, this is all perfect. And the great souls will appreciate and glorify the Lord for these activities. But Rakshansi Vitani Dushodavanti, the demons will scatter. Dushodavanti. Rakshansi Vitani, in fear. So the demons may not appreciate the personality of Godhead. They'll run away in fear, and then they'll make their own arrangements for security, false arrangements for security. Rakshansi Vitani, the Namo Namasyanti, but those who are perfect in understanding will glorify the personality of God. Some comments or questions here? Vijay Krishna? Oh, in the chat box. If the living entity cannot be forgetful of his real identity unless influenced by the avidya potency, what do you recommend for the living entity to resist such a disastrous influence, which makes the living entity experience, for example, living inside a womb of a mother for 9 months, again and again, and who knows how many more times? We recommend chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. And that's what we recommend. Simple, easy, no expense, and effective. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. And if you don't even need to understand the meaning of the mantra, but if you want to understand something, we have Srimad Bhagavatam, we have so many books. All right. Panchatattva Prabhu. I was thinking in reference to one of the complaints against God related by Mother Saraswati, that we think of the human beings with compassion for their suffering state. How can God allow this? But we don't see the causal events that led to that suffering. Yeah, it's we criticize why should these innocent people have to suffer? But you look back 1 or 2 lifetimes and they were Pol Pot or they were some other cruel and vicious person, and you see that he gets away with it, whoever the person might be. If he gets away with it, you say, see, there's no justice in the world, there's no God, there's no law. How could things? And you don't see, but then the next life, when he's punished, then he's, why is this innocent child being punished for nothing? So this is called avidya. This is our own ignorance. We don't understand. And then we criticize, but we don't look at our own responsibility. And we don't take advantage of hearing from those who are not under the influence of avidya. So that we should do. We should hear from those who are wise, upadekshanti te jnanam jnanimastattvadarshana. That would be us. Saraswati, why is it so hard to accept and implement the full conviction that our happiness lies fully in Krishna's happiness? It seems we have a long habit of trying to be enjoyers, a habit that extends for lifetimes and lifetimes. There was an article about former President Nixon, and after he left office, he still would have. He knew all the leaders of the world, and he would have dinners at his home and invite some of these world leaders. And there'd naturally be friendly talks, and there'd be discussions about political matters, world issues. And when expressing his own opinion, he would say, the president thinks. He was no longer the president, but still the president thinks. That habit was there, that unwillingness to relinquish that temporary identity. And we have that. Why is householder life so hard to give up? We have an identity that I'm the husband of this person. These people are dependent on me. I have these responsibilities. None of it is true in the ultimate sense. And even in the temporal sense, it may not be true. I know of people that their family wasn't dependent on him at all. They were doing fine. And still he was thinking, no, I have to work, they're depending on me. It's hard to give up that identity that we have for ourselves. We think of ourselves as the temple president, or as the GBC man, or as the BBT trustee. And it's just very hard to picture ourselves not being the temple president, or the BBT man, or the GBC man. This is the nature of the subtle body. It holds on to misconceptions, to falsehoods, to temporal arrangements, as if they were permanent. The subtle body holds grudges. This person did this to me, this person did that to me. or it holds, it's busy with self-praise. I accomplished this, I accomplished that, without the acknowledgement that it was only Krishna's arrangement that something was able to happen, that it wasn't my independent accomplishment. So when all these misunderstandings persist due to false identification, even in this one life, it's not surprising that this habit of trying to enjoy or be one with Krishna by imitation extends, persists, like from lifetime to lifetime. On the others, therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Namashraya Kori Jatane Tumi Taka. Just make this your only business, to take shelter of the holy name of Krishna. That would solve the problem. Tattva says, is it a general rule that persons suffer or enjoy the results of their activities from this life in subsequent lives? It looks like that to me, but I don't know if this timing is specifically stated in Shastra. Well, living entities may enjoy or suffer the consequences of their activities in this life or next life, or both. In this life, you put your hand in the fire, you'll get quick consequences. So and that's described in the Nectar of Devotion quotes, I think it's Padma Puran, the different stages at which sinful reactions can exist. There are those for which we're suffering now. There are those that will catch up with us later. We've done something and we're going to get it in the future. Or there's the activities we're performing now. We're creating our next set of reactions. Then there are the ones we're planning to do. I have some desire in my heart and I'm planning to rob the bank. And later I'll get the reactions. Or the desire hasn't even developed yet. It's there as a seed within the heart, but it hasn't even sprouted yet. Prabhupada gave the example of sex desire, which is not found in the child. But when the child grows up, that desire, which was there, now comes out in the mature stage or semi-mature stage. So the desire is in the seed form from our previous life. And then when things come to develop to a certain point, then, all right, now let me plan, how will I do this? So from all of these different states of materialistic entanglement in adverse karmic activities, there's reaction, and it may come at any point, now or in the future. But all of these can be canceled by devotional service. The fire of devotional service can burn up all of these things. Karmani nirdati kintika bhakti dāsam. Govindamadi purusham tamaham. And look at this. Being has posted aparabdha palam papam kutam ijam palonmukam kramenaiva praliyante Vishnu bhakti ratatana. There are different stages of dormant reactions to sinful activities to be observed in a sinful life. sinful reactions may be just waiting to take effect, palonmukha. Reactions may be still further dormant, kuta. Or the reactions may be in a seed-like state, bij. In any case, all types of sinful reactions are vanquished one after another if a person engages in the devotional service of Lord Vishnu. Yes. Shara and Doug say, I know this is an age-old question, but I'd love to hear your short, canned answer to another one of the common complaints related by Mother Saraswati. If Krishna knows past, present, and future, how can there be room for free will if this seemingly implies a deterministic universe? Is it that he knows every possible future path you can take, and the jiva chooses a certain path? Well, this is the problem of our cognitive state. If something is not determined, we can't know what the outcome will be. That's our limitation. I've just said if something's more than X number of feet away, we can't see it. That's the limitation of our eyes. If it's too big or it's too small, we can't see it. But that doesn't mean it can't be seen. So by those whose senses are not in that situation of imposing a limit. So in the same way, Krishna can know. We think if it's not determined, you can't, how can you know? For Krishna, that's not an issue. It's not determined, and he knows. And he knows. You know, that appears to be like magic. Even in the material world, and there are so many so-called paranormal perceptions which defy the known laws of nature. People can see things beyond the jurisdiction of their senses. People can apprehend things that are going to happen in the future. People can influence machines to work or not work in a certain way merely by their thinking about it, by the power of thought. These things are have been tested under laboratory conditions and shown to exist. So these things are possible. There's one example from parapsychology I've sometimes cited that, Ananta Shesh says, if we're playing chess with Krishna, he's at least 1 billion moves ahead of us. Yes, that's true. That's true. But we're dealing with the theoretical case where the moves have not yet been even decided. It's just totally open in principle, undetermined. So there's an example from parapsychology. This is from the work of the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, who did research into what's called remote perception or remote viewing. And they would take, for example, some photographs, say 5 or 10, and put them of different, very distinctive places, and put them in envelopes, sealed envelopes. And by some computer random process, one envelope would be chosen. And one person, designated the sender, would be sent to that place, while the second person, the receiver, would stay in the lab. And the sender's job would be to go to that place and just try, by whatever means, to send their impressions of what they were seeing. And the receiver's job would be to try to perceive what was being sent and to write it down. And Princeton developed protocols for judging the results. They tried to make things quantifiable by ones and zeros. Is it outside or is it inside? Are the shapes that you see curved or more in the nature of straight lines? Are you looking at something natural or something man-made? Are you looking at it? So very quantifiable. And at the same time, they also had the subjects would write free form impressions of what they saw. And then a panel of judges would evaluate them, to what percentage do you find that this corresponds to the actual place? You have the picture to see, and comparing that to the written description, how does it look? And by both ways of measure, they found a statistically significant correspondence. So it seemed that people had the ability to receive these impressions. And some of the accounts of what we're seeing are terribly striking. You really, how could this person have been so accurate? But apart from that, or as an extension of that, the pair researchers performed the same experiment. They would have the receiver sit in the lab and record what the place was like. But they wouldn't send the sender until later. And they wouldn't even have the random generator choose which envelope until later. And still they got significant results. So that shouldn't be happening according to the known laws of nature. The matter hadn't even been decided yet. And still, the person in the lab was getting accurate impressions or statistically significant impressions of what the place not yet chosen would look like. So these are small-scale effects in the material world by small conditioned living entities. If these things are possible, then what is the difficulty for Krishna to know everything? Vedam, Samatitani, Vartamanani, Charjana, Vivishani, Chabhutani, Mam Kuveda Nakashtas. He knows everything, past, present, and future, even though no one knows him. Saraswati says, oh, I think I skipped one before in. Oh no, we got that. Let's see, I missed one someplace. Yeah, okay. Panchatattva says it seems like the timing or delay is there, at least enough to keep the living entities from understanding how they're completely controlled by higher power. Yes. I've spoken to that point in my book also, how Maya contributes to this effect by the delay. Kohelet, the speaker of Ecclesiastes, complains that there's this disconnect between cause and effect, and so people think they can get away with anything. And he's right, but that's deliberate. Saraswati says, even eternally conditioned souls serve Krishna's purpose. Their existence is not a waste, as this person argued. Our actions have a ripple effect and serve Krishna's master plan. Yes, we're seeing only, Sadhaputta Prabhu's example is there of the little ant in Manhattan who sees only what's at ground level and misses 60 or 80 stories of vertical existence. And then the ant says, there's no such thing as a skyscraper. I've been all around Manhattan. So that's we're tiny, tiny living entities. And we sit in our offices and say, there can't be God, because if there were God, there blah, 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 blah. And we type it out and publish it. And many other fools read it and say, that's right. Now I see, or I knew it all along. The ants get together and they all agree with the first ants. Yes, we've been all over Manhattan, and we confirm there's no such thing as a skyscraper. So this is our position, tiny, tiny, and yet thinking we can know so much. Well, we've come to just about the end of our hour, and I think we're ready for some more kirtan. Yes.
Trying to think of the melody. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Om Nishnibad Purnamansa Paripraj Charja Ashto Tarasatashi Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Charja Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Mukund Radha Kundikiri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gangamani Ki Jai Jamanamani Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Akendra Prabhu has reminded me of the Janmashtami question. And, on Friday, it's Janmashtami in at least America. And so should I give a class for Friday evening, which is Saturday morning here? And our Janmashtami, Praveen, is also Friday?
No.
Yeah. So that means it will be the morning after Janmashtami for me, and it'll be Janmashtami for you. My inclination is to say this is probably a good time for everyone to be engaged in the usual Janmashtami activities locally. And then we would resume on Monday. Does that seem all right with everyone? I'm seeing some nods. I'm seeing the heart. Okay, I'm seeing some more nods. So we'll skip the Friday evening class, and on Monday we'll carry on. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you.
Maharaj, I think you're muted.
No, actually, he's not muted somehow. Yeah, Maharaj, you're not muted, but we're not able to hear you nevertheless. All right, Krishna.
What to say?
Oh, there we go.
I'm back.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Oh,
Okay, here we can. All right, Krishna.
Krishna, Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Jayādvaita Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
Chancy. What's that?
Haribol.
Evil.